This is NDTV, and you're watching NDTV 24/7.
Hello and welcome to the big fight. Many people, many economists say that this is the single biggest item on the reform agenda that is still left to be introduced. Having said that, it's also an issue that completely polarizes the country into two camps almost, and politically it is most certainly a hot potato, and yet for some reason it doesn't really get discussed as often as it should. We're talking about labor law reforms. We're talking about changes in the way labor laws are practiced in this country, and of course the entire question of labor management relations. Now, we don't have as many strikes as we once used to. We don't hear about as many cases of violence as we once used to. Far left violence is now associated more with the Naxalites than it is with militant trade unions, but this is a problem that we should not brush under the carpet. It could come back and raise its head very soon. So we're going to be taking a look at this entire issue. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome onto the program Mr. Gurudas Dasgupta, a Lok Sabha MP from the CPI. He's also the All India General Secretary of the All India Trade Unions Congress. He's actually there in the ITAC office, not with us here in the studio, essentially because there is a strike taking place in Gurgaon right now, and he's got many of those workers there in his office as we speak. So Mr. Dasgupta, we're really glad you took some time out to join us on this program, and we'll allow you to get back to those striking workers very, very soon. Dr. Amit Mitra, Secretary General of FICCI, has been one of the people who has been particularly articulate and forceful in saying that this is the piece of legislation that this country really needs if it wants to grow fast. So we're going to get your views on that. Manish Sabharwal joined us on a similar program a few months back and said, why don't you ever discuss something like labor law reforms? You put it rather more impolitely than that, sir. But we are now having it. So I'm glad to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Jagdish Khattar, I think the last major incident of trade union trouble was to do with Maruti Udyog when you were there and you were in charge. So now that you have your own company, I want to get your sense of where we head. Great pleasure to welcome Mr. Lakshma Reddy, All India General Secretary of the Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh, which is one of the most powerful trade unions which is not affiliated to the left. Manish Sabharwal, last but not least, Chairman and co-founder of TeamLease Services, one of the largest staffing HR service companies in India. It will be great to get your sense of it. Why don't you start off, Dr. Mitra, by making, if you like, the case for why we need to do this and we need to do this now. Make drastic changes in labor laws.
Well, first of all, let's understand that the labor laws are outdated. Believe it or not, the contract law was formed in 1970, and all laws were prior to that outdated. 200 labor laws, 150 at the state level, 50 at the central level. How can this country function? New definition of workman, where 3.5 lakh paying workmen on in the airlines, pilot, is equated to a 3,500 rupees fellow who's also a workman. Needs a redefinition. No strike rule. You have to have a democratic right. Come and vote on a strike ballot. Multiple trade unions. Do you know that Nayaveli Lignite Corporation, a good public sector company, has 50 trade unions?
Why is it that we only seem to talk about labor laws or labor relations or the rights of the workers when they actually do strike? Every time the pilots go on strike, everyone gets very exercised. When workers are on strike or they are shutting down factories, everyone gets very exercised. Are their rights looked after the rest of the time?
I think the rights of workers to strike in an organized, disciplined ballot manner in a democracy cannot be avoided. It should be there. But the question is, you can't have wildcat strikes.
Okay.
You can't disengage the public from its own activity. You can't shut down factories, because at the end of the day, labor gains, employment gains, if there is economic growth of 9% a year, lot more people will employ. Let's not forget also, 9 million young people join the labor force every year. Okay. Where would they get the jobs from?
Okay, Manish Sabharwal.
I think it's absurd to suggest that there is any direct correlation between high growth rates and high employment growth. The experience of India shows that when we were only growing at 4% per annum in our GDP, our employment growth rate was about 2% per annum. Now that we've doubled our GDP growth rates to about 8% per annum, our employment growth rates have been halved to 1% per annum. And when we talk about labor laws and the plethora of them, there may be some grounds for some amount of rationalization, but on a strict understanding that the purpose of labor laws is to protect labor. But when the capitalist class, and I'm deliberately using this class term, when the capitalist class decides that they wish to increase the size of their cake by saying that they will get more organized to make labor get less organized, that is when my hackles go up.
Is that for the
As for
capitalist?
example, in the case of Contract Labour Act, which Amit just now mentioned, we'll come back to.
Okay, we'll come to the specifics, but on the broader issues, have labour relations been improving, and do labour laws need to be changed? And is this just a capitalist ploy to increase its own share of the pie?
We must protect the workers. Even the management would like. But do we want to protect the workers? Today we are protecting the jobs. And in that process, new jobs are not being created. You have, I think is mentioned about number of labour laws that you have in the center and in the states. And let's go back a little bit more, that why do we need it? As you mentioned, we are going to have about 8 to 10 million new workers in the market every year. Manufacturing sector has to grow.
If I can just ask you, sir, do you first of all agree with what he said, that by and large workers are being better looked after now, and management wants to look after its workers better?
No.
Is that the case, or is that not the case anymore?
No, sir, I don't agree, because in terms of number there may be huge labor laws, but what we witness, what we find in day-to-day affairs is they are more violated than implemented. So first our demand is, let the labor laws be implemented. Even after 60 years of independence, our struggle is for implementation of minimum wage. Our struggle is for implementation of Provident Fund, ESI, other social security measures which are enacted by the Parliament. So our labor laws have not become an impediment for employment generation at all.
Okay, Manish, do you agree with what he said, that the labour laws are preventing people from getting jobs?
Absolutely. There are three myths around labour laws. One is that corporate India will benefit. I mean, the transmission losses between how the law is written, interpreted, practiced and enforced means you've got a low-level equilibrium. The biggest beneficiary of labour law reform will be labour market outsiders, less skilled, less educated, people from small towns and women. The second myth is that trade unions or left parties are pro-labour. They are pro-organized labour. That is 7% of India's labour force. 93% of India's labour force is in the unorganized sector, which does not have trade union membership or angle. And the third myth is that there are no costs. I disagree with Mani when he says employment elasticity since reforms began. As 93% of India, we are breeding unorganized employment because of our labour laws. We are breeding unemployment. 26% of India is practically unemployed, partly because of labour laws. The second important one is we are encouraging the substitution of people by machines. You substitute, but if you want the capital substitution of labor, we are accomplishing that with our labor laws, while India should be focused on increasing the labor intensity of our growth. And a third important one is, it's finally the only way to get people out of poverty is to get them into jobs. If we did labor law reform, the three E's, education, employability and employment, if we did those